You can leave your 2020 TikTok alt era, but it will never leave you. Or at least that's what the trend says. TikTok is back to the discourse of posers, trend hopping, and implications of joining and leaving subcultures. Users are fighting in the trenches, with one side claiming that their TikTok alt era was in fact just a phase that they now find cringeworthy, and the other saying that this mentality signifies a poser who was never actually alternative to begin with. So as a certified academic yapper, I invite you to embark on a journey of trying to wrap our minds around how chunky eyeliner and striped undershirts keep instigating fights between people who don't actually know each other. This isn't just going to be an opinion piece, by the way. I actually talked to someone who went through a TikTok out phase. So let's set the scene. It's 2020, you and everyone you know are locked within four walls of a house trying to navigate the world in circumstances that remind you of fucking zombie apocalypse movies. People are dying, losing their jobs, and going insane from having no real human interaction in months. And amongst all of this, emerges a community of youngins on TikTok that wear more eyeliner than socially acceptable, use either too much or too little saturation on their pictures, and post themselves lip-syncing to 100 gags in Mother Mother. Are Monster Energy guns and fishnets signs of mass hysteria? Or are they merely a way for teenagers to have a little fun on a relatively new social media app? Are these people simply sharing their newfound identities, or are they really posers who will bully alternative people the first chance they get?
I want to be stereotyped. I want to be classified.
Call me Bob the Builder with the way I deconstruct and reconstruct shit here. What even is a subculture? Well, we all know that it's something along the lines of a community of people that are united by same interests, ideas, and aesthetics that oftentimes clash with the norms of society. But that's totally
boring, yawning, sloppy.
So we need to get down to the real business. For example, Dick Hebdige calls subcultures noise, that is, interference in the orderly sequence. He actually brings in some nuance by saying that subcultures don't necessarily reject the parent culture just for the sake of rejecting it. They reassess it, rethink it, create new values and belief systems. And these new belief systems and ways of life actually create the disruptance in the order. Same is noted by Stuart Hall and Thomas Jefferson, who call subcultures a way of cohesive and collective resistance to the dominant order. And then there's also the neo-tribe theory, but I don't really fuck with it because it disregards a lot of stuff that actually influences one's way of life and entrance into subcultures, such as race, gender, social class, and community they were raised in. The new belief system actually assigns new meanings to the most mundane things, like be it a safety pin or a checkered skirt. In some of his work, Hebdige actually references Jean Genet and his idea of refusal, that is, showing disdain for the parent subculture through things that we have assigned new meanings to. The aforementioned Hall and Jefferson actually share a similar idea. According to them, subcultural response in form of style is a way of negotiating, adapting, and resisting the parent culture. So the disdain comes first and then the style follows. I mean, you don't just randomly change your entire ideology, personality, and looks in one night, not unless you're in a manic episode. And this whole reevaluation of the parent subculture doesn't really have to be well articulated either. Oftentimes it comes from feelings of being ostracized or marginalized, like here for example. And you were sort of bound together because the other people hated you. I think that might be part of the attraction too, is being a minority. Being in a self-imposed minority. Or like in this book, one of the self-identified punk girls says she could never fit in anywhere except for the subculture, and that was the reason she joined. So now that we have established that the haircut that you gave yourself with kitchen scissors because you wanted to look cool like Gerard Way is not just a haircut, but a signifier of how you, a lost, ostracized soul, rethink and redefine values and ideas that have been taught to you your whole life, you might have a reasonable question. But what about music and literally any other important stuff? Bad haircuts and safety pins are not what makes a subculture. And to that I say, duh, put some respect on Habdige's name. He's not dumb. His definition of a subcultural style actually includes a wide variety of things that I've taken the liberty of dividing into the outside and the inside parts. Participation in a subculture can include some of those things or all of them, But the poser discourse usually revolves around people that adapt the look and the argot and so on, but not the insider parts. And I mean, rightfully so. According to all of the smart guys that I talked about earlier, resistance to the parent culture comes first and the style follows. But that's like a whole other topic, and since I have no idea how to do segues, we'll just have to. Was 2020 TikTok out an actual subculture though? Well, allow me to present the arguments and you make up your own mind. Spoiler, this here is not a democracy. The remaining part of the video is literally based on the assumption that it was. It was pretty dumb of you to expect to have freedom of thought here, because I'm literally Russian. I don't even know what freedom of thought is. Was there reassessment of parent culture happening? Yes, I would say the society as a whole was going through it, but especially teenagers who were locked inside of their houses with social media as the only vessel to have contact with anyone other than their immediate family. Parent culture, everything that was previously held up as the norm, literally collapsed before our very eyes. So yeah, I'd say there was a lot of rethinking happening. Was there assignment of new meanings? I'd also say yes. How about this? Drinking Monster stopped meaning that you simply preferred this specific brand of energy drinks and started meaning that you belonged to the TikTok out community. And Red Bull was better, by the way, even though it was Monster who sponsored one of my favorite bands back in the day, but no amount of free drinks in the pit will ever buy my consumer opinion. Was there argot being invented? I would argue that yes. For example, even the word out itself stopped simply being a shorter version of alternative and started referring to this specific subculture and this specific style. Mannerisms, makeup styles, and fashion choices are self-evident. Who are you? No, really, who are you? Are you a student? Are you a loser? Or perhaps someone who throws tomatoes at people who have wronged you? All of those are identities, and all of them have meanings that we apply to ourselves accordingly. Those meanings can actually differentiate based on shit like country of origin or culture that you were raised in.
Some call me delusional. I say I'm a dreamer.
So, a lot of our ideas about different identities actually overlap. Like somebody from the US and somebody from, I'd say, the Philippines have pretty similar ideas of what it means to be a high school student. Each person possesses multiple identities. For example, I am an immigrant, but I'm also a waiter considering the amount of cunt I serve on a daily. We don't always have control over our identities though. For example, you didn't choose what family to be born into, you didn't choose your race or socioeconomic class, so a lot of it is actually predetermined. McCowan Simmons introduced the idea of a hierarchy, where every single identity takes its place based on how important it is and how much it impacts your life.
Your culture is not your costume. Do you know I count your heartbeats before you sleep?
This hierarchy, just like identities and the meanings that we assign to them, is not fixed by any means. We constantly evolve, change, and grow. Burke and States, I'm just gonna assume this is how their names are pronounced.
Too velo. Period. Too velo.
Outline four main causes of one's identity changing. First is change in situation. It's where a situation disrupts the previous meaning that you assigned to a certain identity. Second is identity conflicts. It's pretty clear when meanings for the same dimension exist in different identities that we hold, but they clash with each other in some type of way. Third is identity standards and behavior conflicts. It's when you choose a behavior that is somewhat at odds with your identity, even when you're not doing it consciously. And the fourth one is negotiation in the presence of others. It's basically where you adapt and shit. What does that have to do with TikTok though? Literally everything. Here's the thing. All social media that existed before the TikTok boom was actually based on users' network. So your feed consisted of what people you followed posted, and algorithmically recommended shit was actually very rare. Thus, you mainly interacted with users that you yourself decided to follow and different identities that you held predetermined what type of content you were seeing. TikTok, in turn, completely broke the pattern that we were used to. Instead of interacting with each other, users now mainly interact with the algorithm. TikTok's algorithm and the app's design completely decentered the social aspect of social media apps. On TikTok, you are not 100% fully consciously in charge of what content will be recommended to you. There's also this all-seeing entity that tries to put you in different boxes to better categorize you and to better adapt to you. But every now and then it will throw in something new to kind of test the waters, and you try to get that entity to understand you better and better reflect your different identities, thus creating a whole dialogue between you and the algorithm. Lee and other researchers actually introduced a whole algorithmic crystal framework, which basically means that personalized algorithms interact with user identity by reflecting user self-concepts that are both multifaceted and dynamic. Or simply put, TikTok does know that I'm incredibly fun at parties and that I also like seeing videos of monkeys that do silly stuff. Personalized algorithms also share the perspective on different people that we encounter through the algorithm. It happens because users recognize different identities and different parts of themselves that they see in other people's content recommended to them. Once again, simply put, I relate to people who post videos of their cats because I also have a cat. But then I also relate to people who post about how their 2016 emo era was completely insufferable. The same researchers also point to two ways of how we interact with the algorithm, strategically and organically. An example of organic algorithm refinement would be you simply scrolling past a video you didn't find interesting and not paying it any mind, while strategic algorithm refinement is, for example, when you interact with frog content to stay specifically on the frog side of TikTok. The second one often occurs when there's a discrepancy between who you are and who you want to be, both in real life and in the algorithm's eye, which shows that users' awareness of the algorithm actually plays a role in our construction of identity. The algorithm's idea of you, just like your identities, are not fixed or stable by any means. For example, my For You page from 2019 and my For You page from 2024 are completely different, despite the fact that I seemingly have not changed that much. Researchers also claim that effective capitalism and algorithms have a lot to do with how younger generations construct their identities. And no, you cannot fully blame your alt era on capitalism because you do have agency whether you like it or not. Summing all of that stuff up, your interaction with the TikTok algorithm never really stops. You keep giving it information about your likes and dislikes, and it keeps trying to cater to you perfectly so that you stay longer on the app. And within this non-stop interaction, your identities are both influencing the type of content that you see and being influenced by the type of content that you see, which is something very new for social media as we know it. And once again, I do not know how to do segues, so I'll just have to.
Throw my troubles at the world again. All my troubles on a burning pile.
I know my whole vibe kind of screams otherwise, but I actually do talk to people. And in this particular case, I talked to a person who had an alt TikTok phase, but now identifies as basic, or at least basic adjacent. And because I'm not just a pretentious fuck, but also something of a scientist myself, I had the decency to at least follow some protocol. So first of all, this was the person that I did not know earlier. I literally reached out to her because I saw her video about her alt phase. I will also abstain from using the taped version of the interview, but I did transcribe it. So you will be seeing quotes on your screen as we go along.
Because reading is what? Fundamental!
And yes, I will be shoving subculture media down your throat because that's the way that we can actually see if what I've been yapping about checks out or not. One interview is by no means representative of every single person who has taken part in the TikTok out community, but then I'm also not aiming at representing and discussing every single aspect of that, because that would give me the opportunity to yap for 10 hours straight, and trust me, nobody wants that. First of all, the interviewee did point to COVID, quarantining, and not having a lot of contact with the outside world as factors that actually led her to join the subculture, but she also mentioned her personality and her music taste, which pretty much aligns with the average scenario of subculture participation I've described before. She also said that a lot of her interest was based in the aesthetics of it all and the overall vibe of the out kids. And before elitists joined the chat and started yelling about posers, I would like to point you to the fact that Fat Mike of NoFX, love him or most likely hate him, a dude who undeniably did a lot for the punk scene, pretty much recounts the same story. That was how it began. I was a total poser. I bought a Dead Kennedys shirt, never heard Dead Kennedys. The music was almost secondary. The person I interviewed also said she was around 13 to 14 years old when she joined the subculture, which is pretty much within the normal range of what you would find in any subcultural research. When it comes to participation, hers was mostly limited to interacting with other people in the community online and the aesthetic stuff. But I mean, what else can you do when you're locked inside your home? You can't really go to a show and shit. According to the interviewee, even though it may have started with aesthetics, subcultural participation actually left a lasting impact on her. For instance, it helped her come to terms with being queer and come out as bi, as well as initially articulate her main political stances. So even though she describes it as a phase, she points to the fact that being a TikTok out kid impacted her personality, and made her who she is today. She also mentions cringing at some of her past behaviors, like wearing miniskirts and fishnets to school. And that's a point that might bring in the poser discourse back yet again. But I will take the liberty of telling people who pretend they never cringe at their teenage experiences to shut the fuck up. If we take a look at Didi Ramon, for example, he shares a pretty similar thought in Please Kill Me. I was just getting sick of playing in the revival act. It made me feel like a phony standing there in a leather jacket and torn jeans, like I used to dress when I thought I was a worthless piece of shit. It's almost like changing when growing up is a normal part of the human life that is even mentioned by researchers who focus on identity. Anyways, let's get to the juicy part. So why did she leave? She herself points to two main reasons. First of them being grown up, which once again can be found in subcultural research, as described by Andy Bennett. In that particular case, in relation to punk, with people growing up, their subculture participation becomes less tied to the aesthetics and more of a subtly articulated, continuing allegiance to the punk ethos and ideology. I would argue that the same thing was articulated by the interviewee. So, besides her politics, she also mentions how the remains of her alt era pop up here and there. I consider myself kind of basic today, but I've noticed there's little things that I sprinkle in my style that match with what I did in 2020, so I don't regret it at all. I would definitely do it again if I was 13 again. The second point of contention between herself and the alt community was the gatekeeping that she encountered coming from other people who participated in the trend, as well as the strong us versus them mentality that left her feeling less than welcome. In her own words, people would just be like, you look like you make fun of alternative people. You look like you're kind of a bitch. And it's like, I wouldn't just because I don't participate anymore. I still admire those people and I think they're so cool. Okay, it's just not my thing anymore. I know the concept of outgrowing subcultures has always caused a stir in the community, but riddle me this. Why is it that most subcultural research is focused primarily on young people, and that anyone over the age of 25 is considered an elder emo or an elder punk? It's a whole complex issue that even the researchers cannot get to the bottom of, but I'll try to summarize to the best of my ability. The youth response to the parent culture and the establishment, which is literally what subcultures are, clash with what is deemed as the norm in the society. Thus, when it comes to growing up or literally growing older, one has very limited options. You either have to compromise and give in into the societal standards, or alternatively, remain an outsider that continues to oppose the norm, which usually comes with financial struggles and ostracization. It kind of isolates you, because you're like, no, I can't go out and party down tonight because I have to go to work tomorrow, you know? Damn responsibility. So yes, aging out of subcultures is a thing that happens, and I don't think it's a signifier of whether someone is a poser or not. Last but not least, the most important question of them all. Is it all TikTok's fault? Can we still blame capitalism for this? The short version is yes, it kinda is, and yes, you kinda can, but the longer version is a little more nuanced than that. According to the interviewee, if the outside of TikTok never blew up, she would have likely never joined the community. So the idea of TikTok influencing one's identity was real in this case. It popularized a certain aesthetic to the point of where the person I interviewed actually changed her entire wardrobe. But then she also gives some of the credit to her friend circle. They were the reason she initially joined, and they were also the reason she left. And once again, I have no idea how to do segues, but I promise it's the last one, so... So what's the conclusion? The conclusion is simply, it's not that fucking deep. I know it feels ironic saying that after I spent like a week scripting this shit and then God knows however many minutes yapping into the camera about it, but it's simply not. People enter and exit subcultures just as they have done before, but it's simply more apparent now with everyone posting to TikTok about it. Like in the 2000s or 2010s, you would just go up to your best friend and say that you are not goth anymore, and maybe post it to your like Facebook or MySpace, and nobody would really care. But now, with largely decontextualized TikTok, there's a high chance that a fuck ton of people that have no idea who you are will see the video. I've also seen the argument of, this is why we're not taken seriously because of posers like this. And trust me, the old lady that yelled at me on the tram about how I ruined my feminine beauty forever and how I'm a freak truly does not know the difference between punks, goths, emos, and TikTok outs. And she would never know how to spot a poser. Same goes for people who hate everyone who is even a little different from them. Truly, they do not care if you're a real one or a poser. So if you want to blame someone, blame the Nazis and rapists in the scene, or like at least capitalism, not 14-year-olds who are just trying to be cool and fit in.